This is Lori Vallone with Doggone Good Consulting. Welcome back to Doggone Basics. Together with Suki, Loki, and Isaac, we bring you bite-sized segments of Power Platform knowledge. Today's topic is So Where Do I Start? If you've been with us for our first few segments, you'll know we've been building up to the start of our first Power App. We've been working through step by step toward building our solution, and finally we're up to build. I know you probably thought we'd never get there. And so just to review just a little bit, we decided to build a pet health and welfare application. And the intent of this app is to keep up with appointments, medicines, vet records, instructions for pet care providers, etc. And the pack got together and decided we were going to call it Doggone Best Friends. We created some initial data sources, a pet profile, a pet types list, and a pet identification list. We're using Sharepoint for that. And so, as you can see, I used Quick Edit to go ahead and just populate these lists with a few records. The pack is represented here in our pet profile. We have a pet types list and a pet identification list. I haven't put any data in yet. Okay, so we have our data that we can use with this app. So the question is now, how do we start our app? Well, we have a couple of ways we can go here. First off, if you have never ever used Power Apps, a great way to get familiar with how things work is to create one of the apps from the templates. So I strongly suggest finding one of these apps that appeals to you, that either fills a need or just seems interesting, and go on and create that app. You can go into any one of these. Let's look at the budget tracker just for a second. And I can create this app for either tablet or phone. I generally create it for tablet because that's the environment. I'm working on a desktop environment most of the time. By doing this, you're creating a sample that then you can use for reference to say, how do they do that? Okay, so that's how I learned in the very beginning to use Power Apps. I picked one. I don't even really remember now which one it was that I started with. May have been inventory management. And there's been lots of new ones come along now. There's quite a few more than there were when I first started. But by doing so, you've got something you can go back and refer to and say, how was this done? Now that I have done that and I know what I'm doing, I can start an app from blank. Basically start with an empty sheet of paper and build everything up I want. Alternatively, we can start from data. And while I don't typically do this regularly, because I kind of have a base that I want to work from most of the time, this is a great way to get started if you're working on your first app. Because what it's going to do for you is it's going to create a display screen, a series of screens that allow you to interact with your data. So we're going to use that today to be where we start. So my data is in Sharepoint. If your data was in something else, you can choose another data source, but SharePoint's probably the most common data source. It's going to do the groundwork and then ask me, where is my data? Okay, so I have my connection to Sharepoint here. If I had not used this before, I would have to establish a new connection and choose what my connection was. I have a connection to Sharepoint, so I'm going to pick that. And then I'm going to choose the site that I want to connect to. If it didn't show up in this list of recent sites, if it was the first time I'd been there, I could take the site name, basically the Sharepoint, the sites, and then the site name, and paste that in up here and get to it. But because mine, Doggone Best Friends, is already here, I don't have to do that. And then I need to choose a list. Well, the list that is the primary driver for our Best Friends app is the pet profile. So that's the one I'm going to choose to start my app. That's important because that's going to control what's the main drivers of your app. So make sure you choose the one that represents kind of the core functionality of your app, and then connect. And now it's going to need to work a little bit. It's going out there and it's actually building screens, and it is putting controls on those screens, creating a default application that accesses the data on your screen. And in just that little bit of time, poof, we have a Power App. And we could save this app now and have a working Power App that you could go back and forth to. Chances are, though, it doesn't have everything that you're going to want, or it may be showing things that you don't want. For example, I see right away that it's displaying the ID number. I don't care about the ID number. That's something that I can choose to get rid of. Maybe I want to display something else in its place. I can do that. I can click on that control and I can say, I don't want to see the ID. I want to see the breed instead. And as simple as that, I can change those fields. Let's say I want the name to show up in bold so that it jumps out, and I want it to be larger. I could do that, no problem. Okay, so I now have a base that I can work with that will allow me to search and will allow me to add more pets. And then if I have a particular pet, I can go and look at the detail. Now, you'll notice right now I'm in editing mode. I'm in the Power Apps editor. And if I click on something, it's going to select those items. If I want to play the app and see how this app works that was created for me, I'm going to come over here to the preview button, or as most people refer to it, the play button. Okay, and that's going to allow me to see that on the screen. And you'll notice it has created it in tablet mode, in phone mode. So it's going to show it to me in play that way. All right, let's go back over here. And if we select here to view the item details, it'll take us to a second screen that is, they've chose to display the title field, which we're not using. If you recall from when we set up our lists, we took that out as a required field, so that's why it's blank. We have pet name, breed, color, markings, birth date, age, and type. Okay, it just picked out the fields that it thought were relevant and put them on the screen. It gave us the ability to edit this item. Okay, so we could go through here and change any of these. Let's say it's she's not really white. Let's say she's off-white. And if we save that, that data is now saved here. I could delete this record with this icon. I'm not going to delete Sookie. She'd get mad at me if I did. But all of this functionality was created for you automatically simply by selecting Start with Data. If I was doing a blank Canvas app, I would have had to build this all myself. Now that's not hard to do. I could create something very similar in a very short period of time, and we will do that in a future episode. But having this already there, now I can go out and see how some of these things work. So if I take a look at my app over here, I'll see that there are 3 screens that were created: a browse screen, a detail screen, and an edit screen. We saw those when we went out and played the app. That's fairly common to have a browse with a list of the items that are available in the data source, a detail screen that lets you look at one of them, and an edit screen that lets you change that one. Okay, so that's very, very common. You'll notice app here. App is a special feature that allows you to set certain things to take place before your app starts or on start. Okay, and then you have the ability through these three dots to be able to click and run those items so as if you had just started the app. This particular app right now doesn't have anything in on start, but we'll talk about that more later, but be aware that it's here. If we go to this browse screen that we're on, click the down arrow, we'll be able to see all of the controls there, and you'll notice we have a gallery. This here is the gallery, and in the gallery there is a separator, which is the line between the entries, that next arrow that took us to the next page, the body, which is a standard that the body, subtitle, and title are three fields that are automatically created when you use a photo type gallery. Now, best practice here. If this was the app I was going to have and build off of, I would want to rename these. Okay, so since this is the name of my pet, I would probably come in here, and there is an excellent document on best practices. One of the recommendations there is to use some standard naming conventions for your variables. And I have adopted some of my own. This is a label field, so I start all label fields with LBL. So this is label pet name. The field that we have above there that I put breed into, that's also a label field. We'll call it LBL breed. And we're not using the title field at all, so I can actually delete that. And I can delete by either using the three dots and doing delete, or simply highlighting and using my delete key. Okay, now notice I got a little red X here. Okay, that means there is an error, and you'll notice there's a down arrow beside it. And I can click on that down arrow and say edit in the formula bar. This is our formula bar. Well, there was a reference to the title field, and since I just removed the title field, it has generated an error. Okay, so I either need to point this to something else, or I need to clear it out. This is for the gallery as a whole, I presume. I'll have to look and see exactly what it is, if that the error is being attached to. Let's see, it is actually it's attached to this breed label. And if we go over here and look, there we go. There's where our errors are, because it's using references that are based on the title field. So we're going to need to base that on another one. We won't go into it and fix it in this case. I'm actually going to just undo my delete and put that title field back for now. Very handy feature to be aware of right here. And we'll deal with those references in another episode. But let it suffice to say that it's a best practice to rename your fields here. I'm going to rename this image field, call it IMG pet pick. Okay, so you get the idea. And there are numerous other fields that are here. There is a separator line here that's been created with a rectangle. You'll notice there are several icons used: a search icon, a new item icon, a sort icon. And these things, let's look at sort, have actions associated with them. And so if you click on it, the on select action fires and causes something to occur. In this case, it sets a variable to the sort sequence and says which way this data needs to be sorted. And then based on that, the data shown in this gallery is going to get sorted based on the sort sequence that was set in that variable. Okay, so that's kind of just a little introduction to how some of these controls work. We'll get into them in a lot more detail. We'll focus on specific controls and how those work as we work through this app. But at this point in time, we now have created a working app that would allow us to add new pets. Matter of fact, let's go out here and let's do an ad. We're not using the title field. Let's say our pet is, how about Bugs Bunny? And right now you'll notice we haven't connected any of these things up to lists. Again, that's something we'll do in a later episode. Right now, the only thing this app knows about is the pet profile list, because that's the list we started with. So for right now, I'll need to type in any values I want into these fields. There is no lookup to be able to automatically set these. Let's say the age is 1 and the type is I don't have rabbit in this list right now. Let's see, did I enable this list to allow me to enter? Yes, I did. So that it would allow me to enter new values if a new type of pet came along. Now, the reason this had a list is because the pet type field in our Sharepoint list over here was set up as a choice field, and so that choice field is controlling the choices available. It's not tied at this point to the lookup in the pet types table. Okay, that's something again we'll do in a later lesson. So at this point, if this app, let me go back over here to my app, let me save Bugs Bunny here. So if we're happy with the way our app is functioning now, we can simply go out and save our app. We'll have to give it a name. We'll call it Doggone Best Friends. And we need to decide whether we're saving it to the cloud or to our local computer. I recommend saving it to the cloud. That way, if you want to edit it on a different computer, it will be available to you. If you save it only locally, then you're not going to be able to get at it. And I've found plenty of opportunities where I've needed to use a different computer to be able to go in and work on an app. Then we'll click Save. And our app will be written out to the system. And we can, if we click on See All Versions, we'll see that we have a version saved here, version 1. It's automatically been published for us. Once we make changes to it, we'll see additional versions, and at that point we'll have the option of publishing it as we go along. Now, if we go back over here to the details screen, we'll notice under web link we have a URL. Let's grab this URL. This is how we can play the app without coming into Studio. So I'm going to open a new browser window, paste in that URL, and click Enter. And it's going to launch our app for us and run it in Power Apps. And you'll see it functions just the same as it did if we were in play mode, except we're simply in a standalone edit app mode. So that's a basic introduction to creating a new Power App. In future episodes, we'll recreate the same app from the ground up as a Canvas app, and we'll look at each of the controls that are used here and what they do and the features of each, and we'll begin to add more functionality to our app as we progress to learn more and more about Power Apps. Thank you for joining me in Doggone Basics, and we'll see you next time.